Welcome back, everybody. It's Lisa
and Danielle, and we have a very special guest here with us today. We have got Detective Heidi Chance with us. We are super excited. We have been talking about this interview on our past episodes this last few weeks, and just the impact that she has had on the community and really with us since we met with her. And we're just super excited to have her with us today. So Heidi, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to meet with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. We would love if you could share with us your past and what you're doing now. And yeah, share it with the listeners.
So I am a retired detective from Phoenix Police Department. I actually spent 25 years with Phoenix Police Department, 23 of which I was a sworn officer. I actually started at 18 years old working for Phoenix Police Department.
Wow.
And then I turned 21 in the academy. And basically, I spent most of my career in the human trafficking unit. After my time in patrol, I was in Maryville Precinct in West Phoenix. And I spent some time doing patrol and then school resource officer, community action officer. And then I decided to move to the human trafficking unit, which was called Vice back then. And it's an undercover unit. And I spent the whole rest of my career there, almost 14 years working undercover and investigating human trafficking. So I am very happy to share all that I know. As far as after that, I went on to become a special agent with Arizona Department of Gaming. And then I just recently got recruited away from gaming to work for the Arizona Attorney General's office as a special agent investigating human trafficking again. So I'm happy to be the investigator for the state.
Gosh, it's such it is such an impactful thing. Lisa and I have kind of shared since we first spoke with you with really everyone that we've encountered. I feel like just what that initial conversation meant to us. I feel like for the most part, people understand what they understand about this work. And there's still so many gray areas to us, right? And both of our husbands are in law enforcement, and there's still so many things I feel like we don't know. And so we really lean on, I think, people like you to educate us and educate the community to all the things. I've got young kids, and two are females and one is a little guy. And I certainly know that I look at things very differently than I would have perhaps when I was growing up. I know that I was a kid running the streets, right? And that was normal. And I don't think that it's so normal nowadays. And there's a lot of things that we have to be looking at to protect the kiddos around us. And not just kiddos. I think that it's happening to adults. I mean, I don't know. You can kind of answer that for us. I don't know the age group that this is happening in.
Yeah, it absolutely can be anyone. What it is human trafficking is it's actually a business. It's the supply and demand. So if you think about it in simplest terms, you have traffickers, pimps, one and the same. I don't know where the confusion's coming on social media. People are thinking that's two different individuals. The trafficker is a pimp is a trafficker. It's just two names for the same person, exploiting the vulnerabilities of others. So they are supplying the victims, the vulnerable people, for the demand. And the demand are the individuals who are purchasing other people for sex. And so those individuals happen to be predominantly men. I haven't had any experience in my career, nor have I had a colleague tell me a instance where they had an investigation involving a female sex buyer. Those are predominantly men, and they're the ones creating the demand for this issue.
Where do you think this all starts? Like, if you had to rewind all of this, what would be the start of this issue?
Well, a lot of it is on both the sides of the two parts of this. For the demand, I think that's being created by pornography. And I think that men who watch pornography on a regular basis and they get excited and turned on sexually about pornography, that eventually they go to act on that. And when they act on that, they either go to a known area for prostitution on the streets, or they go to online sources such as platforms like OnlyFans, Patreon, those kind of platforms, or they go to prostitution websites and actually go purchase a physical person for the purpose of sexual gratification. And I think all of that originates from the pornography that they're subjecting themselves to, and or grew up with, or learned behavior in maybe an older brother or an uncle or a mom's boyfriend or whoever introduced them to pornography, or even friends at school. And so that's what's so dangerous about porn being readily available to anyone. And then on the other side of it, as far as traffickers, I have this really interesting, conclusion I've come to in my experience, that I believe traffickers, pimps, it's a generational learned behavior. I have had several investigations where I've arrested traffickers' mothers, relatives for being involved in destroying evidence or intimidating witnesses, trying to prevent people to show up for court against their relative that's in trouble. And I think that a lot of times traffickers kind of learn to be pimps from uncles or older brothers or some individual in their life. Not that all traffickers are males, by the way. There are females that were originally victims of trafficking and then learned how to run a trafficking ring themselves, and then they become the trafficker. But what I've noticed is a lot of generational traffickers where they have some relative in their history. So I think that's definitely the two dynamics there as far as where this is starting.
So I have a question about that. So if, that seems like a weird dynamic, not a weird dynamic, but a more sensitive one. If the female who was trafficked then becomes the trafficker, how in your line of work then is that looked at? Because it's almost as if it's, you're almost molding to a way of life that you didn't know necessarily was right or wrong. Like, how is that looked at in your line of work for that female?
Well, it's definitely a case by case thing, because I have had several instances where, adult females are committing crimes. They're doing sexual acts with juveniles. They are the traffickers themselves, and they actually need to be held accountable for their crimes. Whether they, a lot of this is they obviously probably experienced it as a victim themselves, but all of this is still a choice. And if they choose to move into this role and then start victimizing other victims, then they are choosing to be held accountable for what they're doing, in my opinion.
Sure.
Obviously, we have evolved in our response to prostitution. When I first started in 2007-ish doing undercover shadows, temporary assignments with the Vice Unit, we were focusing in on arresting sex buyers here and there, but predominantly every day they would show up to work and they would go out to 27th Avenue or Van Buren or the street prostitution area and make arrests of prostitutes. And there was no asking any questions of getting them out of the life. There was no offering them assistance. It was just misdemeanor arrests all day long. We've definitely evolved away from doing that. We still at some point do have to make an arrest because, believe it or not, on those known areas for prostitution, there are residential homes, there are businesses, there are churches, there are schools, and there are people who don't want to have individuals having sex in a vehicle outside their daughter's bedroom window or condoms thrown in their front yard. And so we do have to make an arrest, but we have evolved, and we are asking the question we never asked before. And we're asking, these individuals who we're making contact with based on the crime they're committing, we're asking them, hey, we have a victim advocate right here. What can we do to help you get out of this situation you're in? And if they take us up on the offer, obviously we're not going to charge them with a crime. And we're going to try and offer assistance more than once. But at some point, we have to draw the line in the sand, and they keep choosing to go back to this situation when we've offered them help. And so that is where we're at now as far as our response. And I think we're doing much better than we were before. There's lots more that we can do, but we are absolutely going to have to make those decisions case by case. But I know what you're saying as far as individuals who, like juveniles, sometimes they not only participate in sex acts with men for money, and of course we're not charging them with that crime, but they may be selling drugs for the trafficker. They may be forced to rob people, like lure these men into a hotel room, and then the pimp comes in with a gun, and they participated in that robbery by getting the person up there in the hotel room for the pimp to come in. So holding them accountable for those things, those are definitely things that I think are being more seen as a causation of the trafficking and not, a direct choice that victim chose to participate in that. This totality of the circumstances as far as how they found themselves committing those crimes are being taken into consideration where they weren't before. So definitely we are recognizing that.
Wow. Yeah. So when this type of incident happens, like someone is trafficked, what are the odds that they are found safe?
Well, I mean, I don't know who put it out there, but I think if you Google, the life expectancy of a prostitute is 7 years. And that is, based on drugs, that's based on the violent incidents that they endure as far as the, beatings. And then just overall being in these awful areas that are not safe for your, normal people to be walking around at 2 a.m. There are other criminals out there besides traffickers and their victims. So, there's definitely a lot of risk. It is extremely dangerous to participate in that. And, getting out is really hard. Getting out involves a whole process of, placement, services, resources. And we have some of those things in place. Like we have the Dream Center or other like New Life Shelter, Sojourner Center, Catholic Social Services, Jewish Family Services. We have placement, but some of those placements can only handle victims who are, not on drugs, who aren't pregnant, who don't have kids already, who aren't attached to a pet, and those placements are for predominantly female. We don't have probably enough services for LGBTQ plus transgender or boys or male adults. So we definitely are lacking in those kind of things. And then along with the placement, the whole recovery process, getting them services, getting them an ID, getting them a job, helping them with their STDs, helping them get off the drugs, helping them with their children who may be in the process of being taken away from them from DCS, helping them with their brand tattoo that the trafficker may have put on them. There are organizations like Soul Survivor Inc. who actually will either do like the laser treatment removal or will do a tattoo over that tattoo to hide it and help them with all of that. Because that's really like a daily reminder in your face. And sometimes that tattoo is on your face of what you've been through and what, happened to you. So lots and lots of work to still do.
Gosh, are there any, are there any cases that you have right now that are sort of like mind blowing, that are just something, not, you don't have to share details obviously, but just like something that you can share with us that you've got going on actively?
Yeah. So I have a bunch of cases that I completed that I can definitely talk about, but I have, bits of my observation of this issue going on in these cases. Number one, just because we put these guys in prison or in jail awaiting trial, they have not stopped their prostitution activities. They are able to conduct their prostitution activities from jail.
So how is that happening?
Well, I have a really good relationship with jail intelligence, and they are, really, really bogged down with having to monitor not only jail calls, video visits, the mail, but now they have tablets at the jail. And, they swear that they don't have the internet. I don't know. All I know is that these are hardened criminals, and if kids can figure out how to bypass parental controls on a phone, I'm pretty sure criminals in prison who have nothing else to do all day long can figure out how to get on the internet and continue their business. And I know they're continuing their business because I've had instances where I've actually charged, house of prostitution on a person in jail still from jail managing prostitutes and having them work for them and send them money, put it on their books, all those things. So that's one observation. And then another observation, this is really bad. I've had 4 traffickers now that I put in prison because I've been doing this so long. Years ago, they got out and they went right back to prostituting again. And then we've had to re-arrest them, redo new investigations, they're new victims, and put them back in prison again. So there's some kind of really bad, no reforming them, no fixing them in prison. That's not working. It's not doing anything.
Right.
So we're going right back out to it.
Right. But I mean, if we, like, we all know addiction, right? So like, sex is an addiction, and we know that we can't shut off drugs like we want to. So I'm pretty sure we can't just shut off the sex drive like we want to in some of these men that are doing this, and they're super addicted to the pornography like you stated earlier. So what choices do we have? Like, what path can be taken in order to make to have reform on this? Like, what do we do next? What is there?
So there's bills that are in the process or being introduced to, especially if you're trafficking a minor, it be a lifetime sentence. You're not going to get out and do this again to anyone else. And then it's going to be a matter of making sure they're not doing it or continuing to do it from inside jail. So it is really, really interesting what we're going to have. You know, if that gets passed, we're going to have a, really good time celebration on being able to put these traffickers away for the rest of their life. But there's going to have to be other things put in place so that they don't continue to traffic from in custody.
Right.
Do you find that most of these, like, women and children are brought into this world through the internet right now, or are they brought in based on, having been walking down the street? Yeah, circumstances, like being at the mall alone with friends, or
not knowing what to look for.
Right.
Yeah, so there's several ways that a vulnerable person gets involved in trafficking, and basically it is, a trafficker doesn't have a job, despite what they might say. They might say they clean carpets or, Uber or something. They don't have a job. Their only job all day long is to manage the victims they have and seek out new ones. And so whether they do that in person in public places like the mall or bus stops or parties or concerts, convenience stores, or if they can use the internet, they're going to use whichever's easiest. And right now the internet offers the easiest option for me to copy and paste a message to hundreds of profiles a day on different social media platforms. And, there's new ones all the time popping up. And if I can spread out my message on all these different platforms, maybe law enforcement won't be on Discord yet, or maybe law enforcement won't be as heavily on Snapchat or Instagram, those kind of things. So I know that they're doing this because I've done search warrants for their social media profiles, and I've seen the copied and paste message, the same one they sent me as an undercover, trying to recruit and groom me, to all these other profiles, all female. And the other dynamic here is they aren't concerned with you being local either. They're sending these messages all over. It doesn't matter. Especially if you have a juvenile that has an open profile, they're putting out there on their posts that they're unhappy with their family or mad at their parents or not wanting to go to school anymore. So if they're posting things like that, these guys are seeing those posts, and then they see that person as a person to target, and they will, slide into their private messages and engage in conversations with them and encourage them to, join their team or leave their situation and come with me. And I'm going to promise you all these things, this better life. I'm going to take you traveling. You're going to get your hair done, your nails done. You want to go to Las Vegas? Let's go right now. I'll come pick you up.
Do you want to be a model? You hear about that one all the time. We want to take pictures of you.
Yeah. So it's all part of the luring and the grooming that traffickers can do anonymously, almost with multiple people a day.
Yeah.
And that's where the internet is really not helpful in this situation.
Sure. It goes way past what everybody thinks about the basics of privacy or putting blocks on certain things on your kid's phone. There's so many things to get around that. It's not just location services. It's not just, those aren't enough to stop them from finding or getting in touch with these people.
Yeah. So the national average age of entry into sex trafficking is 13 years old. And it used to be 15 when I first started this. So, and it's really getting closer and closer to 11, 12. So these conversations, and actions, like you mentioned, the parental controls, the, shutting off location services, the apps, but the conversations need to happen earlier than you would think also. And that's why, I'm working on authoring a guide for parents right now to help, because I keep saying, hey, parents, have these conversations, but I haven't really said how to have those conversations.
Sure.
And then I also want to include in this guide, in the unfortunate instance that you do have a situation where you have someone sending inappropriate images to your child or trying to have them send images and those kind of things. How do you respond to that as a parent? How do you involve law enforcement? What does that look like? How do you capture evidence for the police? Those kind of things. So I'm including all of that in my guide because I want parents to be super informed, especially if that kind of thing does happen. Because unfortunately, it is happening on a daily to kids all over the United States and all over the world. And I don't know that there's anything out there right now that tells parents what to do and how to respond to that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. How would you know how to approach that? That's one of those conversations you don't think about having to do, and that's terrible.
Yeah.
I think we live in a frightening time where, we kind of teeter on, we're overly protective or we're the extreme opposite. And we're like, oh, that would never happen to us. That would never happen here. It would never happen to us. And, it's really frightening. And in fact, Lisa and I were talking to someone just recently, and I literally text her, and I text her, being naive is dangerous. And it really just, it's one of those like instincts in me to just think like, you can't think that it's never going to happen to you, because it's the second you turn off that hypervigilance that something happens. And, it's frightening to think that there's so many parents that don't necessarily understand the dangers of the phone, or they don't understand the dangers of the computer that the kids are playing on every day. Even their 15-year-old that's doing homework in the kitchen. We were Googling some off the wall, not Googling, but on Amazon, some off the wall stuff last night. And it's shocking the things that come up via the internet just to anyone. To anyone. And I'm actually more in shock right now that there are not more safeguards to the men doing this behind jail, like in jail, and that they're still able to function fully doing what they're doing in jail. And they haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, that's been a battle for me because, the case that I'm specifically mentioning is a resolved case, so I can talk fully about it. This pimp is in custody for the next 108 years, and he's a pimp. Both dynamics exist with this case. I arrested him in 2014 for pimping out a 16-year-old. And back then, the law was different, where we would have had to prove he knew she was 16. And we were working on that case, trying to get that proof, but she disappeared. She went back to prostitution. She left Arizona. She turned 18, uncooperative. And if I don't have a victim that can testify in front of a jury, it's sad to say, but I really don't have an investigation anymore. And so unfortunately, that's where that was left, that 2014 case. Fast forward to 2019, he's pimping out another 16-year-old, and the law changed in 2016. And we don't have to prove you knew how old she was. So she testified that she told him she was 19. He probably knew she was younger. I can't prove it. I don't have to. Anyway, bottom line is that girl took 5 months after we rescued her to come forward and tell us anything about him actually pimping her out. We knew, but we have to hear it from her. So I started this investigation 5 months late, and I only got there because of a survivor victim advocate that was working with her that got her to come forward. And I was able to put this entire case together, find evidence. She had, some phones that I didn't even put two and two together. The last time I contacted her in 2017, I did take her phone because her mom said, I don't know who gave it to her. Impound this because I don't want it here. And I had the phone, and that phone had evidence on it for the pertinent case in 2019. So anyway, the bottom line is she testified against him, and he was found guilty on all 11 counts and submitted and was put in jail in 2021, 2020, end of 2020, beginning of 21 for that 108-year sentence. But while I was investigating her, I also was trying to do what we're doing now, is going after these traffickers financially and looking at money laundering, illegal enterprise felonies. And so listening to the jail calls and having that relationship with jail intelligence, I heard him directing 3 other adult females to go prostitute out of a house right near 27th Avenue and Northern. And we ended up sending in undercovers and doing a house of prostitution investigation. And he was managing all of that from in custody. While I'm still also trying to do the juvenile case. So the money laundering was part of the 11 counts, and he was found guilty on that, plus having that victim come testify on her 18th birthday against him, really nailed the nail in the coffin for him. But, it took a lot. And if she hadn't showed up, luckily we had the other felonies we were going after him for, because technically everything that you're doing exploiting victims and earning illegal money from prostitution is all money laundering, illegal enterprise. So those other felonies are, the perfect thing for us to do. And so trying to inspire law enforcement based off of my own experiences is also something that I'm doing as far as training law enforcement, getting them to want to do these cases, because these cases are really hard. I mean, I joke with homicide detectives, their victim is dead right there on the ground. They're not going anywhere. Our victims disappear. They go back to prostitution. They commit other crimes. They are no longer cooperative. Then they change their mind. Back and forth. And so it's really hard to even, as an officer and be a detective, to want to even do these cases, because it's a lot of work. On top of trying to find the evidence, but just dealing with the victim alone and getting them to a stable place is really difficult. And we were doing that by ourselves before we got victim advocates. So, doing our job, getting calls from patrol, getting calls from Silent Witness, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, patrol, all of this, plus trying to manage victims, was really, really hard. And now at least we have victim advocates to help us with that. But it is really, really hard to do these cases. So inspiring law enforcement through training that I've got going on is also something I am working on as well.
Yeah.
I admire that. I mean, the reality is, I mean, maybe you can debunk this. I might be wrong. The reality is there's not too many women sitting in law enforcement usually, right? So you're kind of dealing with like men having to understand the urgency and the need and they're not my husband's going to kill me for this. They're not quite wired the same way we are to the understanding of this. Like, I could sit and have this conversation with him in his law enforcement mind after all of these years. And, he may still not have the same like drive and passion I might have for this, to be like, you just have to do this. Right. So I can understand your desire to be like, we need to break into every department to get them to understand how to deal with these cases and want to deal with these cases, because they can't just be left alone.
Yeah. And these cases are messy. I mean, you've got victims that go back to prostitution, and for sure, if the defense finds out about that, they're going to bring that up in the trial, and you're going to have to explain why that happened. And, it's messy, but they are definitely worth it. Especially to get these pimps taken out, because they're going right back out to it.
God, I admire the work you're doing so much.
Yeah, there's so much to that. There's so much.
How often are people being moved interstate, like from state to state, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know about numbers, but almost all of my cases, traffickers have moved their victims. And the reason for that is part of this entire dynamic of the control is isolating them from family members and friends, burning bridges, not letting them talk to family and friends, where the family and friends think, they don't care about them anymore. But really, if they're not allowed to, they get beat up over it. They get their phone taken away, all these things. But the isolation is very real, like moving transient from hotel to hotel, city to city, state to state. Obviously, they're doing that for a reason. One, because they don't want to get caught by the police, because it's really hard for us to find them. And by the time we get wind of them, they're, already moved on to the next city or the next state. And then once they come back, then we can deal with them when they come back. Or, if we've got a victim currently here, we can pursue them. But then, two, they don't want their victims to get to know somebody. Like, let's say we're at the hotel hanging out, and I, the pimp, see my victim over there talking to the janitor. And I'm thinking, I wonder if that normal person's going to tell my victim to leave me. I don't want that. Time to leave. Let's pack up and go. So the isolation and keeping them very on the move and completely dependent on that trafficker is part of all of this. So the probability that a victim's been trafficked out of state is pretty high.
Wow. I know last time we spoke, you kind of talked about, and because I want you to kind of paint this picture for people. You talked about the type of person that these traffickers can be. And, we were a little bit, Lisa and I, even being a little bit more aware, I think, of this, this topic. We were, I think, in shock. So you had talked about where these men go and where they frequent and who they could potentially be and what they look like. Because it's not always the run-of-the-mill scumbag, right? Like it's
right.
So who are these men that people would be looking at?
So
or women, right?
Well, yeah, and that's just it. So as far as sex buyers, because they're also part of this, they're actually the whole reason this thing exists, because they're demanding the ability to purchase people for sex. They could be anyone. They could be a police officer. I've arrested cops before. Doctors, nurses, medical professionals, construction workers, day laborers, non-U.S. citizens, businessmen, fathers, husbands. I mean, I've had, as an undercover, thousands of men take their wedding ring off, put it in the cup holder, and then solicit sex from me. So that's the demographic of the buyers. As far as the traffickers, like I said, I feel like it's generational, and it is a individual who's learning this either from being a victim and moving into that trafficking position, or being in a household where that's an accepted behavior and some relative or the whole family financially benefits off of this behavior. So that is probably the demographic that I would say is. And the thing is these traffickers are not just one race, not just male. Like I said, they could be female, and not just one age. It could be any age. And we've had juvenile pimps, So, yeah.
This is crazy. Where do you find that there's like a cover story that's more similar than another for these like pimps? Like, is there something that they utilize more often than other cover stories as to what their job is? I know you said they don't have a job, but like, if they're selling themselves as something, what would that be?
Aspiring rapper.
Really?
A lot of them have YouTube channels, and they're influencers, or they try to act like they're rappers, and they have their following, and it's really good evidence, because they say to me in front of the camera in the interview room, I'm not a pimp, but then here they are rapping about being a pimp, and doing derogatory things with women in their little videos and all kinds of things. So aspiring rapper. I've had a lot of them.
Interesting. It makes sense. It makes complete sense, because do you want to be in my video?
Yeah.
Do you want to be,
Yeah.
I get it. I could see exactly how that would lure.
I was expecting like a Uber driver.
Oh,
Like
okay.
a,
Yes. Yeah, I
Yeah.
only had one kind of claim that, but I think they know that law enforcement has a relationship with Lyft and Uber. There's the whole investigation section. I've actually toured the Uber facility downtown Phoenix. It's really cool. And they definitely have, the ability to track all kinds of things. So that would be too much evidence for the police, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because the whole thing about stranger danger,
Mhm.
it's so that little phrase is now this giant. It encompasses so much now. It encompasses, like you said, men, women, the internet, YouTube, little things. I mean, just stuff you would never know. Man,
Yeah.
it doesn't look the same,
No. Yeah, and I've also had a couple with recording studios, but they weren't really recording studios.
Oh,
There's a stripper pole and a stage. Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha.
I could never do what you do. Well, and and I say that because I want so badly to see everyone for what the life they still have left in them, right? And I think I might have shared this with you before. I work with drug addicts and stuff like that. So to me, it's almost that same dynamic of like, I know you want the help, but then you go right back to what you were doing before. And so when you want that help again, come back to me and come, but you've got to want it just like I want it for you.
Uh-huh.
Except, well, I guess they do. They do disappear, right? They disappear. But
yeah,
it's someone isn't taking them from me. They're not being taken, but then there's drugs and this, and it's combined, and it's such a scary world out there for these people. And so now I feel like when you walk the streets of downtown Phoenix and you see what a problem all of this is together, you're looking at the women especially down there wondering, are they part of this? And how do you get them out of this, and how do you help them, and are they part of the problem? And there's like such a thing, and where is their family, and does their family know what's going on? Like, I have this like big huge question mark now about all of this, and it's just a frightening world, I think. And like I said, I commend you for being such a big part of this, because I don't know that many people I couldn't do what you do exactly.
yeah. Thank you. I think your point though is that you work with people who are doing things to themselves.
Yes.
And I'm talking about people who are doing things to other people.
Yes.
And those people have there is no excuse. And so that's why I have zero remorse for feeling that they need to go to prison forever.
Yeah.
Because they are doing things to other people. And then when we've given them an opportunity to change their behavior in prison, they come out and they do it again.
Yeah.
I have a huge problem with that. So that is definitely a little bit of a difference. There is almost no rehabilitating their behavior. If they can't learn it in prison, then they deserve to go back over.
There must be a lot of drugs must play a huge, huge part in what you do as well, because I imagine they use drugs to sedate some of these women sometimes if they're not cooperative, or to even get them from point A to point B. I imagine that's a big part of your role too. Like there's almost like between the drug world and the sex trafficking, it's got to go hand in hand.
Yeah, so it's sometimes part of the control over them is to build up an addiction where they can control them through that addiction. So I have a case that literally in the search warrant evidence of the conversations on the social media platform with the trafficker, each of these three victims, Daddy, can I have a pill? And they're talking about the fentanyl pills. Do this date first. And then this one, Daddy, can I have a pill? Do this date first. Daddy, can I have a pill? Do this date first. So it's all control through that means for that particular trafficker. Although as an undercover, I have had my own daddies where I've had pimps that have tried to recruit and groom me. And I've been told that I'm not allowed to use drugs because they don't want to compete with the drug to control me. So it can be seen both ways, but definitely drugs are involved, and definitely those victims also participated in sales of drugs for the trafficker.
Right.
Wow. Gosh.
And then you've got to like figure out if they are, like you said, case by case, if they are being forced to do this for their, their safety or their life or their family's lives or whatever excuse they give them, or if they now are a willing participant in helping them.
Yeah. I mean, the way to kind of draw the line is obviously adults make choices, and juveniles, they don't, their brains aren't fully developed yet. And I think that we can err on the side of, they were influenced or encouraged, especially when I conduct interviews with victims. I ask them, have you ever done anything like this before? And if they say no, then everything that they learned, everything that happened to them is as a result of this trafficker. So that's pretty easy to draw the line for that particular victim, that, had they not ever met this person, their life would not be on this path. They would not have these, sales of drugs in their past history as a juvenile. And, therefore those crimes we should revisit and, exonerate them from those things.
Well, if there's a few big takeaways that you would like our listeners to really walk away with today from this with you, what would those be? And I know you've got some really special things coming up as far as some courses that you do. There's an ebook that you've got coming out. So I'd love if you could share those things with our listeners. I know that it's going to be something that Lisa and I deep dive into. So, and we'd really love to just continue sharing what you've got for the community. So, if you could just give our listeners those few big items to walk away with today, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. So I know that you had mentioned a big case that I should have talked about before now, but I'm going to talk about it now. This case is resolved. It went to trial in 2015, and it really is a testament to many things. It is why I called my course The Power of Awareness, because when I first started investigating these types of cases, I'd have pimps doing the same thing they're doing now, to juveniles, but they were only getting plea offers for 9-10 years. And then fast forward to now, we've got traffickers, like I just said, being put in prison for hundreds of years. And so that is only happening because of the power of awareness, because of prosecutors learning that this is a very serious crime and to do a better job in prosecuting it. Judges understanding the reason why, each of these counts hold this many years, and then not making them be, okay, well, let's just put that all together in the first 10 years. Actually make it be on top of each other. 10 years for this one, 10 years for that one, 10 years for that one. And then juries. So in your audience, if there's someone listening that's ever served as a juror, I really want my message to be out there so that juries can understand the dynamics of human trafficking, because there may be a time when you're called to serve and I'm describing to you that this victim was walking freely down the side of the road with a phone in their hand, but they're trapped. They're really not free to leave. And understanding that as a juror and wrapping their head around, wait a minute, I thought victims had to be locked in a bedroom somewhere or handcuffed to a bed to be a victim. And really, that's not what we're talking about here. And all the dynamics that go along with that. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway is if you are called to be a juror, understand it is definitely a big deal to put someone in prison for the rest of their life. But also, it's a big deal for a victim to live with what happened to them for the rest of their life. And it's your job to make the right choice here and, really understand the entire crime and what all goes along with the crime. So that's one big takeaway as far as that goes. And, as far as victims themselves, that big case that I was alluding to, that had 7 victims. It was familial trafficking, 2 juveniles. Familial trafficking basically means the victim knew their trafficker. And a lot of people associate that with a relative, someone they're related to, father, uncle, mother, but it doesn't always have to be. It could also be someone you're in a romantic relationship with. So this was an example of true familial trafficking, where it was an uncle trafficking his 13-year-old niece. But all of that to say, When she was 16, she notified law enforcement of what was going on, and we started our case. But the problem with that investigation is it took 5 years to go to trial. And luckily, we were able to have all 7 victims come testify 5 years later. And luckily, we had really good witnesses testify about the dynamics of trafficking. And luckily, we had a lot of evidence, because the trafficker is really the most evil person I've ever met, was sentenced to 493.5 years. So that is a record for the United States.
Wow.
That is what I'm talking about as far as the power of awareness. Be bullshit, please, for 9-10 years to almost 500 years. That's where we're at now, and I want to maintain that momentum. I want to keep that going. So that's why I'm involved with what I'm doing on the side of all of my law enforcement duties. I have my own business. achanceforawareness.com is my website. And yes, I do have a course called The Power of Awareness, where I really dive into, in great detail, victims and how they get into this situation, sex buyers and what happens with them, obviously traffickers and how they recruit and groom victims. But I also cover kind of the evolution of myself and my understanding of this issue, and then law enforcement's response and how that's evolved. And then I do a whole section on how you can get involved in trafficking without being a vigilante and, filming your own TikToks of conversing with child predators and then calling the police later. That is not okay. And people are doing that all the time to be Instagram famous or TikTok famous. And that is messing up our evidence. That is entrapment. That is making it harder for undercovers to do their job. All kinds of snowball results to that. And I hope that gets put to stop right now. But definitely there's things that you can do to get involved in this fight. And people are very inspired right now by movies like The Sound of Freedom. That is a great movie. It's got everyone thinking about human trafficking. It is a depiction of international trafficking, though, for a great example of domestic sex trafficking happening here. I encourage you to watch the movie that Frontline PBS filmed. It's called Sex Trafficking in America. It was actually done on our unit. They filmed us for 3 years. Yes, I'm tooting my own horn. I was in that movie, but it also will show you some of these undercover operations that I'm talking about that we do the right way, proactively, to go after traffickers and buyers. And it really does go through a story of a juvenile who was lured away and went with these traffickers and was sold from one to the other. And, her story is what it really is about. And her recovery and all of that she went through, and the results of her getting justice against those 3 traffickers. So anyway, with all that, yes, I do have the course that's available on my website. I have my Instagram. Unfortunately, when I went to apply for the Instagram, I had to put the underscore in between each word. So it's A_chance_for_awareness. And I post a lot about, new legislation coming out, articles all day long, every day, of arrests and people who are doing awful things. And I try to be very active on there, as well as LinkedIn under my name, Heidi Chance. Super active there. And, I'm responsive to people who message me on both those platforms if you have a particular situation going on, or have a question. And then, yes, coming out in April 15th, I'm launching my Parents Guide. Like I said, I keep telling you parents to have these conversations, but I don't tell you how to have the conversations or what to include in the conversations. And then obviously I want you to know what to do if there's an unfortunate circumstance that you may have to involve law enforcement, how to collect evidence, how to not engage with these people, how to not, accidentally log out of the platform and then we lost the whole conversation, those kind of things. So very important, I think, and I don't think there's anything out there like it. So I am looking forward to sharing it. And then obviously I'll have a little checklist to go through so you can be reminded of what things to talk about in these conversations. So all of that's coming out, and I'm excited to continue to offer things to the community, and as well as law enforcement, and the training that I do and the public speaking that I'm also doing. So
yeah.
So I know that we had chatted about you had spoke, or you talked with a mom's group. And so we briefly kind of talked about that. Have you talked with like a mom's group and a group of young kids, or this age group of kids in combination? And do you have that down to kind of talk to that age group, or do you feel like it's only like an adult type conversation and then they take that and transfer it to the kids?
So as far as when I come and present, I am still an undercover, even though I'm in a movie and here I am on a podcast and several podcasts. But it's also difficult to talk to youth about this. I totally feel parents, but when I present on this, I like to show a case study, of like an actual 15-year-old getting assaulted by her trafficker. And it's kind of a little bit too much, I think. But there are organizations like Red Light Rebellion here locally in Phoenix.
Okay.
That's a married couple. They're super relatable. They're young, way younger than me. They're, super young, and they have an entire program of, not just sex trafficking awareness, but teen violence and, appropriate relationships. And I love what they're doing, and I would never want to take away from what they're doing because they're doing really good, and they are in the schools. And so, and they're really, really well placed at the schools. My curriculum is more for, older high school, college, and parents, adults, for, the entire awareness portion of it, I would say. But there's also Rachel Thomas. She is a survivor of trafficking. She was actually in college, barely in college, and was recruited away under the ruse of a modeling situation and was trafficked and escaped her trafficking situation. And so she has an entire curriculum and an amazing website. I think it's anti something, but she does a lot also as far as kind of on the East Coast of the United States, as far as her trafficking awareness for parents and adults.
Sure. Yeah, and it's not just parents. I mean, this you could. I mean, I could see this being applicable to anyone: mothers, fathers, sisters, teachers, daycare providers. Really any adult.
Yeah. I presented to a nanny organization, and
nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to get into obviously corporations to be a public speaker. Obviously, I'm an informational speaker. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm going to tell you the truth and what's really happening. I'm not here to make you have a better day. I'm here to tell you to stop if you're participating in this kind of activity, as far as the individuals in the room that might be at a conference that think what happens at the conference stays at the conference. But yeah, definitely trying to get involved in businesses recognizing, their responsibility to educate employees. We've got hotels now that are being sued by victims. So what's to say that a employer doesn't get sued when a sex buyer participates in purchasing an individual on their lunch hour using the company's computers? I can see those things happening. So, educating your employees, and then instilling some policies on, zero tolerance if you're arrested for this, even though it's a misdemeanor at this point. You're fired. Don't be doing that. And certainly, safeguards and computer programs and those kind of things on your computers at work to deter and prevent them from accessing these websites, all kinds of things. So trying to break into that game too.
Okay. Gosh, well, we're super excited to have had you here with us today. We're excited to continue to share your message. I think that Lisa and I would like to continue to try to share that message. I know, like I said, we had talked about hoping to get together a large group of parents or, a mom's group, because I think that this is something that people need to hear. And to your point, it's educational. It's more than that. It's necessary. It's not motivational by any means. This is something that we should just go hear in life and take it and teach it to our children. And we need to know that these things are real and they're happening around us. And we have the ability to safeguard our homes and safeguard our kids. And so we need to take those steps to be able to recognize and stop where we can. So I can't tell you how how much we appreciate what you're doing.
So much.
It's not an easy job. I couldn't do
No.
it. I don't know how you've done it,
Yeah.
but we think that you're amazing. We're going to continue to support this always.
Always.
Thank you again so much for being with us today.
Yeah,
Yes, we appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having
all
me.
right. Yes, you're welcome. All right, everyone. We will be back on next week. We've got a lot of fun episodes coming up. So don't forget to follow us on all of our fun social media posts. If you have any questions for us, don't hesitate, reach out. And we'll be back with you shortly. All right, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.